Black twin sisters denied seats at ceremony seconds later. They took the stage as guests of honor. The crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the grand ballroom of the Westwood Plaza Hotel, each facet catching and multiplying the afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya Richardson stood at the entrance, her twin sister Zara beside her, both women taking in the scene before them with practiced composure. They wore matching navy blazers over crisp white shirts, their natural hair styled in elegant twists that framed faces so identical that even close friends sometimes struggled to tell them apart. "Table assignments should be near the front," Maya murmured, adjusting the leather portfolio under her arm. "Dr. Chen said they'd have our names clearly marked." Zara nodded, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against her own matching portfolio. At 28, the twins had attended countless professional events, but this one felt different. The annual Excellence in Healthcare Innovation ceremony wasn't just another conference. It was the culmination of 5 years of relentless work, sleepless nights, and a determination to prove that 2 girls from the south side of Chicago could change the face of medical technology. As they approached the registration desk, Maya noticed the subtle shift in atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they softened, eyes flickering toward them and then quickly away. She'd felt this particular weight before, the invisible pressure of being seen but not recognized, present but not belonging. The woman behind the registration desk looked up from her iPad, her smile professional and distant. She was perhaps 50, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a name tag that read, Catherine Whitmore, Event Coordinator. Her eyes swept over Maya and Zara with the efficient assessment of someone used to making quick judgments. "Can I help you?" Catherine asked, her tone pleasant but guarded. "We're here for the ceremony," Maya said, returning the smile with one of equal professionalism. "Maya and Zara Richardson." Catherine's fingers moved across the iPad screen, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm not seeing you on the main guest list. Are you with catering?" "Service entrance is around back, and you'll need to check in with Jose in the kitchen." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and unmistakable. Zara's hand tightened on her portfolio, but Maya placed a gentle hand on her sister's arm, a gesture perfected over decades of being each other's anchor. "We're not with catering," Maya said, her voice level and clear. "We're registered guests. Perhaps check the VIP list?" Catherine's expression shifted to something between irritation and condescension. "Miss, I've been coordinating events at this hotel for 15 years. The VIP list is extremely exclusive, and I know everyone on it personally. Now, if you're looking for work, the kitchen is really your best bet, but you'll need to go through proper channels." "Let me see that list," interrupted a male voice. A man in an expensive charcoal suit had materialized beside them, his silver hair swept back, eyes sharp behind designer glasses. His name tag identified him as Richard Pemberton, Board Chair, Westwood Healthcare Foundation. Catherine's demeanor transformed instantly. "Mr. Pemberton, of course I was just the list, Catherine." She handed him the iPad with trembling fingers. Richard's eyes scanned the screen, his jaw tightening with each passing second. When he looked up at Maya and Zara, his expression was unreadable. "You're right," he said quietly. "They're not on the guest list." He handed the iPad back to Catherine, who shot the twins a triumphant look. "They're on the honored guests list, a completely different document which you would know if you'd bothered to review all the materials I sent last week." The color drained from Catherine's face. There was so much to review, and I thought—" "You thought," Richard cut her off, then turned to the twins. "I apologize profoundly for this treatment. Your names should have been the first ones she learned." He extended his hand first to Maya, then to Zara. "Richard Pemberton, I've been looking forward to meeting you both for months. Your work with Health Tech Solutions has been revolutionary." Zara shook his hand, finding her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Pemberton. We're honored to be here." "The honor," he said firmly, "is entirely ours." He turned back to Catherine. "We'll discuss your continued employment later. Right now, these women need to be escorted to their reserved seats, front row, center." "And they're +1s. They're parking," Maya said, still processing the whiplash of the interaction. "They should be here shortly." "Excellent. Catherine, once they arrive, please ensure they're brought directly to the front. No delays, no confusion." Richard's tone made clear this was not a request. He gestured toward the ballroom. "May I escort you myself? We have about 20 minutes before the ceremony begins, and I'd love to hear more about your latest prototype." As they walked into the ballroom, Maya could feel eyes following them, some curious, some calculating, all reassessing. The massive space was arranged with hundreds of chairs facing an elevated stage draped in burgundy curtains. Floral arrangements the size of small trees flanked the stage, their fragrance mixing with the scent of expensive perfume and aged wood. Richard guided them to the front row, where 2 seats were indeed marked with elegant place cards bearing their names. He lingered for a moment, seemingly wanting to say more but held back by protocol. "I just want you to know," he finally said, his voice lower, "what happened at that registration desk. It's inexcusable, and unfortunately it's not uncommon. But what you two have accomplished, what you're about to be recognized for, that's going to change things. Maybe not everything, not overnight, but it matters." After he left, Zara sank into her seat, exhaling slowly. "I knew we should have arrived earlier. Told you that registration was going to be—" "Don't," Maya interrupted gently. "Don't make this about timing or preparation. We did everything right." She saw what she expected to see, not what was actually in front of her. "Story of our lives," Zara muttered, but there was affection in her tone, not bitterness. They'd learned long ago that anger consumed energy better spent on their work, on proving through action what words could never convince. The ballroom was filling rapidly now, a sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses, pearls and Rolex watches. This was the upper echelon of healthcare hospital administrators, pharmaceutical executives, medical device manufacturers, and the philanthropists who funded them all. Old money and new prestige, gathered to celebrate innovation and bestow recognition on those deemed worthy. Maya watched them take their seats, noting the double takes as people noticed 2 young black women sitting in the most prestigious spots in the room. Some whispers were probably innocent. "Who are they?" "Must be important if they're in front." But she'd learned to recognize the other kind too, the whispers tinged with skepticism, with the unspoken question that had followed them throughout their careers. Do they really belong here? "There's Mom and Marcus," Zara said, relief evident in her voice as she spotted their family entering through the main doors. Their mother, Diane Richardson, moved through the crowd with the quiet dignity of a woman who'd spent 30 years teaching high school chemistry in an underfunded district. She'd raised the twins alone after their father died when they were 12, working 2 jobs to keep them in advanced placement classes and science programs. Now 62, she wore a simple but elegant burgundy dress, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a classic bun. Beside her, Maya's husband Marcus walked with the easy confidence of a pediatric surgeon who'd learned to navigate spaces like this through a decade of residency and practice. Catherine intercepted them at the entrance, and even from across the room, Maya could see the woman's obsequious apology, her rushed explanations. Diane's face remained impassive, but Marcus's jaw tightened in the way Maya recognized as controlled anger. When they reached the front row, Diane embraced both her daughters simultaneously, a ritual from childhood. "My brilliant girls," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be so proud." Marcus kissed Maya's cheek, then pulled her close. "I just heard what happened at registration. Are you okay?" "We're fine," Maya assured him, though the tightness in her chest told a different story. "Richard Pemberton handled it." "That's not the point," Marcus said quietly. "It shouldn't have happened at all." "But it did," Zara interjected, "and it will again, probably tomorrow, probably next week. We can't control that. We can only control our response." Diane sat down between her daughters, taking each of their hands. "When you were little, maybe 7 or 8, you came home from school crying because a teacher had assumed you'd cheated on a test. Do you remember? You'd both gotten perfect scores, and she couldn't believe 2 black girls from your neighborhood could score that high without help." Maya nodded. She remembered the shame, the confusion of being punished for excellence. "I told you then what I'll tell you now," Diane continued. "Some people will always see you through the lens of their own limitations, but you don't shrink to fit their expectations. You expand until you shatter them completely." The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the ceremony would begin soon. Richard Pemberton appeared on stage, testing the microphone, then disappeared behind the curtains. The crowd settled, conversations dropping to murmurs. A woman approached their row, late 50s, impeccably dressed in a cream Chanel suit, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. Her name tag read Victoria Ashford, Chief Executive Officer, Ashford Medical Enterprises. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the particular accent of generational wealth, not quite British, not quite Bostonian, but somewhere in between. "I believe there's been some mistake. These seats are reserved for the honored guests." Maya looked up at her, recognition sparking. Victoria Ashford was legendary in healthcare circles, a third-generation CEO who'd inherited a medical supply company and transformed it into a billion-dollar empire. She was also known for her philanthropy, her ruthless business acumen, and her complete intolerance for anything she perceived as disorder. "There's no mistake," Maya said calmly. "We are honored guests." Victoria's perfectly microbladed eyebrows rose. I see, and you are. Before Maya could respond, a younger woman appeared at Victoria's elbow, maybe early 30s, wearing an identical expression of polite skepticism. Mother, is there a problem? Just sorting out a seating confusion, Clarissa. Victoria turned back to Maya and Zara. These seats were reserved specifically for the Innovation Award recipients. If you're guests of one of the board members, I'm sure we can find you appropriate seating elsewhere. Diane started to rise, but Zara placed a hand on her mother's arm. Mrs. Ashford, Zara said, her voice crystalline clear, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Young lady, I've been on this foundation's board for 20 years. I personally review the seating chart for every major event. The Innovation Award recipients, she glanced down at a program she'd pulled from her designer handbag, are the founders of HealthTech Solutions, a company that's developed revolutionary diagnostic technology for underserved communities. Now, I'm sure you're very nice people, but these seats are taken, interrupted a new voice. Dr. Janet Chen, the keynote speaker and a Nobel laureate in medicine, appeared beside Victoria. She was a petite woman in her 70s, her short silver hair framing a face lined with intelligence and humor. Victoria, I see you've met Maya and Zara Richardson, the founders of HealthTech Solutions, the Innovation Award recipients. The silence that followed was profound. Victoria's face cycled through several expressions: surprise, disbelief, comprehension, and finally, carefully controlled embarrassment. I didn't realize, Victoria managed. The website photos must not have loaded properly when I reviewed the materials. Or, Dr. Chen said pleasantly, you made an assumption based on what you expected Innovation Award recipients to look like. She turned to the twins, her smile warm. I've been following your work for 3 years. That portable diagnostic unit you developed, the one that can run 30 different tests in under 5 minutes using a single drop of blood, it's going to save thousands of lives in rural and urban healthcare deserts. Thank you, Dr. Chen, Maya said. Your work on accessible medicine inspired our entire approach. Victoria had recovered her composure, though spots of color still marked her cheeks. I apologize for the confusion, it's just that. Well, you both look so young. We're 28, Zara said flatly. The same age Mark Zuckerberg was when Facebook hit 1 billion users. The same age Elizabeth Holmes claimed to be revolutionizing blood testing, except our technology actually works. Clarissa, Victoria's daughter, winced. That's fair. Look, I know how this seems, but my mother really does support innovation from diverse founders. She donated $500,000 to the Women in STEM scholarship program last year. Supporting diverse candidates in theory, Diane interjected quietly, is very different from recognizing them when they're sitting right in front of you. The lights dimmed further, saving everyone from the increasingly uncomfortable conversation. Victoria and Clarissa retreated to their seats 2 rows back, their departure marked by furious whispering. Dr. Chen lingered for a moment. 20 years ago, I was the only woman keynote speaker at a major medical conference. I arrived early like you did and was directed to the coat check. They assumed I was there to take coats, not give a speech. She smiled wryly. Progress happens, but slowly. Don't let it harden you. Let it fuel you. As she walked away, Marcus leaned close to Maya. How are you really doing? Maya considered the question. The truth was complicated. She was angry at Catherine's assumptions, at Victoria's blind spots, at the constant need to prove herself worthy of spaces she'd earned the right to occupy. But she was also used to it. That was perhaps the saddest part. At 28, she'd already developed calluses over the wounds that might have destroyed someone less prepared. I'm okay, she finally said. This is our day, Marcus. We're not going to let other people's limitations ruin it. The ceremony began with Richard Pemberton taking the stage, welcoming the assembled guests to the 20th Annual Healthcare Innovation Awards. His voice carried easily through the sound system, warmth and authority in equal measure. Today, he said, we recognize excellence, we celebrate innovation, but most importantly, we acknowledge that the future of healthcare depends on fresh perspectives, on voices and visions from communities who understand firsthand the gaps in our current systems. Maya felt Zara's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing as they had since childhood. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The ceremony proceeded through several categories: lifetime achievement, excellence in research, public health leadership. Each recipient approached the stage to warm applause, their accomplishments detailed in video presentations, their contributions to medicine and healthcare celebrated. During one such presentation, Maya noticed a commotion in the back of the ballroom. A group of young people, college-aged, diverse, energetic, had entered and were being directed to standing room along the walls. They carried signs, though Maya couldn't make out the words from this distance. Zara noticed too. "What's that about?" Marcus checked his phone. "It's trending on Twitter. Some student group found out about what happened at registration. They're here to show support." "How did they even know?" Maya asked, though part of her could guess. In the age of social media, nothing stayed private for long. "Someone filmed the interaction with Catherine," Marcus said quietly. "Posted it. It's already been shared thousands of times with the hashtag belonging in healthcare." Deanne squeezed Maya's hand. "The world is changing, baby. Not as fast as it should, but it's changing." The awards continued. When Richard announced the Innovation Award category, the lights dimmed completely, and a video began playing on the massive screens flanking the stage. The footage showed their clinic in Inglewood, one of Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. Elderly black women, their faces weathered by lives of hard work and limited healthcare access, sat in their portable diagnostic unit, a sleek pod about the size of a phone booth that could run comprehensive health screenings in minutes. The camera captured tears of relief when one woman learned her diabetes was manageable, that the symptoms she'd been ignoring for years weren't a death sentence but a treatable condition. Then the video shifted to a rural clinic in Appalachia, where their technology was being used in a town 3 hours from the nearest hospital. A young mother held her baby while the diagnostic unit ran tests that would normally require multiple appointments, multiple trips, multiple days of lost wages. "Healthcare inequality," said the narrator, Dr. Chen's voice, Maya realized, "isn't just about access to facilities. It's about access to information, to early detection, to the kind of routine screening that wealthy communities take for granted." The video showed Maya and Zara in their lab, surrounded by prototypes and coffee cups, working late into the night. It showed them pitching to skeptical investors, most of whom had passed on their vision. It showed the moment they received FDA approval, both of them crying in an office littered with regulatory documents. "The Richardson sisters didn't just invent a device," Dr. Chen continued. "They reimagined what medical care could look like in communities that have been systematically underserved for generations. Their portable diagnostic unit costs 1/20th of traditional hospital equipment, runs on solar power, and can be operated by trained community health workers rather than requiring physicians for every test." The video ended with children playing outside one of their diagnostic units, painted in bright colors and decorated with murals by local artists. The message was clear. Healthcare could be beautiful, accessible, woven into the fabric of communities rather than locked away in intimidating institutions. The lights came up, and Richard Pemberton stood at the podium, his eyes scanning the audience. "We've heard a lot today about innovation, about excellence, about pushing boundaries and improving outcomes. But what Maya and Zara Richardson have accomplished goes beyond innovation. They've challenged us to confront why those boundaries existed in the first place." He paused, letting the words settle over the room like snow. "When I first learned about health tech solutions, I'll admit I was skeptical. 2 young women with no formal medical degrees developing diagnostic technology in a field dominated by engineers with PhDs and decades of experience. It seemed unlikely." Maya felt the familiar twist in her stomach. Here it comes, she thought. The narrative of unlikely success, of beating the odds, of being exceptional precisely because they were unexpected. But Richard's next words surprised her. "And you know what? My skepticism said more about me than it did about them. It said I'd internalized certain assumptions about who gets to innovate in healthcare, about what founders are supposed to look like, about whose ideas deserve funding and attention." He looked directly at Maya and Zara. "I almost didn't take the meeting with them. My assistant had to convince me. I'm grateful every day that she did, because in that meeting I saw not just brilliant technology, but a brilliant understanding of the communities that technology would serve." He gestured toward the screens, which now displayed statistics. Wait times reduced by 80%, early disease detection up by 300%, healthcare costs decreased by 60% in communities using their diagnostic units. "But before I invite Maya and Zara to the stage," Richard continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "I need to address something that happened today, something that should never have happened but honestly happens far too often in spaces like this." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Maya's heart began to pound. When the Richardson sisters arrived today, they were asked if they were catering staff, not by a confused volunteer but by someone who should have known better. Someone who made an assumption based on appearance rather than preparation. He let that sink in. This isn't about shaming one person. It's about acknowledging a pattern that exists throughout our industry. We talk about diversity. We fund diversity initiatives. We claim to want new voices and perspectives. But when those voices and perspectives actually show up, do we recognize them? Or do we see what we expect to see? Victoria Ashford had gone very still in her seat. So had several other board members. I've served on this foundation's board for 15 years, Richard said, and in that time the Richardson sisters are the first recipients of our Innovation Award who are women of color. The first. In 15 years, that's not an accident. That's a system we all participate in, whether we intend to or not. He turned toward the wings of the stage. Maya Richardson, Zara Richardson, please join me. The applause started immediately, building as the twins stood and made their way to the stage stairs. But as Maya climbed those steps, she heard something else beneath the applause, the sound of the student protesters, chanting in unison. They belong, they belong, they belong. On stage, under the bright lights, Maya felt momentarily disoriented. This was the moment they'd worked toward for 5 years, the recognition that could open doors to funding, to expansion, to scaling their technology to every underserved community in America. But it was also complicated by everything that had preceded it. The assumptions, the corrections, the need to constantly prove their right to exist in these spaces. Richard handed them the award, a glass sculpture of intersecting circles meant to represent the connection between innovation and community. It was heavier than Maya expected, solid and real in her hands. Who would like to speak first? Richard asked. The twins exchanged a glance, a conversation happening in the silent language they'd developed over 28 years of shared experiences. Zara nodded slightly. You take it. Maya approached the microphone, placing the award carefully on the podium. She looked out at the audience, hundreds of faces, some genuinely celebratory, some still processing, some clearly uncomfortable with Richard's pointed words. She found her mother's face in the front row. Diane was crying, pride radiating from her like heat. 5 years ago, Maya began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My sister and I were working in a research lab at Northwestern, watching doctors try to treat patients who showed up in emergency rooms with conditions that should have been caught months or years earlier. Diabetes, hypertension, cancer, all things that are manageable or treatable if detected early. But these patients had no access to regular screening. No primary care physicians. No way to know they were sick until they were critically sick. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We asked our supervisors why we couldn't develop portable screening technology that could go into these communities. We were told it was too expensive, too complicated, that people in those communities wouldn't utilize it anyway. That was the phrase. Wouldn't utilize it. As if poor people and marginalized communities don't want to be healthy. As if lack of access is the same as lack of interest. A ripple of reaction moved through the audience, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. So we left the lab. We maxed out our credit cards. We worked out of our mother's garage for 2 years. We pitched to 47 investors before we found one willing to take a chance on 2 women without medical degrees or engineering PhDs, just biomedical science undergrads with an idea and a lot of determination. Zara joined her at the microphone. We didn't do it to prove people wrong, though I won't lie, that's been satisfying. We did it because we grew up in Inglewood. We watched our neighbors suffer and die from preventable diseases. We watched our father, her voice caught, and Maya automatically reached for her hand. Our father died of heart disease at 43. He knew something was wrong. He felt the symptoms, but by the time he could afford to see a doctor, it was too late. The ballroom was completely silent now. So when we talk about innovation, Zara continued, we're not just talking about technology, we're talking about justice, about the right to know what's happening in your own body, about having access to the kind of early detection that wealthy people take for granted. Maya squeezed her sister's hand, then took over. Today, something happened that Mr. Pemberton mentioned. We were assumed to be catering staff, and honestly, that's not even the worst assumption we've faced. We've been mistaken for custodians, for assistants, for plus ones. We've had investors ask to speak to the real founders. We've had people compliment our English, not realizing our mother is a chemistry teacher and we were both valedictorians. She let that settle, watching faces in the audience react, some with recognition, some with shame, some with defensive resistance. But here's what I want to say about that, Maya continued. Those assumptions. They tell us more about the people making them than about us. They reveal gaps in imagination, in exposure, in understanding how wide and varied excellence can be. And yes, those assumptions are harmful. They create barriers. They make people question themselves when they should be questioning the systems that taught them who belongs and who doesn't. Richard nodded from his position beside the podium, encouraging her to continue. But those assumptions also fuel us, Maya said. Every investor who passed on us, every doubt we faced, every time someone looked surprised when we walked into a room, it reminded us why this work matters. Because if we can face this skepticism with advanced degrees, with documented success, with technology that works, imagine what people in the communities we serve face every single day. Zara leaned into the microphone. There's something else we want to say. To the young people standing in the back who came here today to support us, thank you. Your generation gives us hope. You understand instinctively what many people in this room had to learn, that excellence comes in every color, every gender, every background. That innovation isn't about fitting a predetermined mold. It's about solving problems, period. She turned to address more of the audience directly. And to everyone here who holds power in healthcare, who makes hiring decisions, funding decisions, who decides whose ideas get heard and whose get dismissed, we want to challenge you. When someone unexpected walks into your office, your boardroom, your lab, can you see them clearly? Or do you see your own assumptions? Maya took over again. We're accepting this award today not just for ourselves, but for every person who's been underestimated. Every student told they're not smart enough, every entrepreneur told their idea won't work, every professional asked if they're in the right place. This is for our mother, who taught us that excellence isn't about permission, it's about preparation meeting opportunity. Diane was openly sobbing now, Marcus's arm around her shoulders. This is for our father, who didn't live to see this moment but who taught us that our value doesn't depend on other people's recognition, Maya continued, her own eyes filling. And this is for every community that's been told they don't deserve the same quality healthcare as wealthier neighborhoods. You do deserve it, and we're going to spend the rest of our careers making sure you get it. Zara raised the award. Thank you to the Westwood Healthcare Foundation for this recognition. Thank you to Dr. Chen for believing in us from the beginning. Thank you to everyone who supported our work. And to those who doubted, thank you too. You taught us to build something so undeniable that doubt becomes irrelevant. The applause this time was different, louder, more sustained, with people rising to their feet. The student protesters were chanting again, joined now by others in the audience. Maya saw Victoria Ashford standing, clapping, tears streaming down her face. Catherine, the registration coordinator, was crying too, though Maya suspected for different reasons. But mostly she saw her mother standing with her arms raised, palms open to the sky in a gesture of gratitude and triumph. Diane, who had worked 2 jobs. Diane, who had helped them fill out college applications. Diane, who had never once told them their dreams were too big. As they left the stage, Richard pulled them aside. That was incredibly powerful. I want you to know the foundation wants to invest $5 million in scaling your diagnostic units. No strings, just a belief that this technology needs to reach every underserved community in America. Maya and Zara stared at him. $5 million would change everything. It would mean units in 50 cities instead of 5. It would mean training programs for community health workers. It would mean reaching hundreds of thousands of people who desperately needed access to early disease detection. Why? Zara asked. After what happened today, because of what happened today, Richard interrupted. Because you're right, we need to do better, and that starts with putting resources behind the people who are actually solving problems, not just the people who look like they should. As they walked back to their seats, people stopped them constantly, board members wanting to schedule meetings, journalists asking for interviews, fellow honorees offering congratulations. But one interaction stood out. Victoria Ashford approached them, her daughter Clarissa beside her. Up close, Victoria's carefully maintained composure showed cracks, red eyes, trembling hands. I owe you an apology, Victoria said without preamble. Not just for what happened before the ceremony, but for every time I've made those kinds of assumptions. Every time I've let my own limited imagination determine what's possible. Mrs. Ashford, Maya began, but Victoria held up a hand. Please, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. My company has spent millions on diversity initiatives, scholarships, mentorship programs, recruitment efforts, and I genuinely believed I was supporting people like you. But today showed me that I've been supporting the idea of diversity more than actual diverse people. I didn't recognize you because I'd never truly imagined you. Clarissa placed a hand on her mother's arm. We want to do better, not performatively, actually better. Would you be willing to meet with us, to help us understand how to create spaces where recognition isn't something you have to fight for? Maya studied them both, looking for performative guilt or defensive self-protection. But what she saw was genuine reckoning, the uncomfortable work of examining one's own blind spots. We'd be willing to have that conversation, Maya said carefully. But understand, we're not here to make you feel better about your mistakes. We're here to change systems. If you want to be part of that change, truly part of it, that means getting uncomfortable. It means listening more than you talk. It means accepting that you'll get things wrong and not expecting praise for figuring out what should have been obvious. Victoria nodded. I understand, and I'm prepared for that. As they finally settled back into their front row seats, the ceremony continued with closing remarks and a networking reception. But Maya barely heard any of it. She was thinking about the long path that had led them here, every obstacle, every doubt, every small victory that had accumulated into this moment. Marcus leaned over. How does it feel, really? Complicated, Maya admitted. Triumphant and exhausting at the same time, like we won something but also had to fight for recognition that should have been automatic. That's because you did, Diane interjected quietly. You did fight for it, and you'll probably have to keep fighting, but baby, you also won. Don't let the fight diminish the victory. The reception began, and people flocked to their corner of the ballroom, investors wanting to fund expansion. Hospital administrators interested in pilot programs, medical students asking for advice. The student protesters, invited and officially now, approached with respect and excitement. One young woman, maybe 19, with natural hair and a halo of curls, stepped forward nervously. I'm pre-med at Northwestern, second year, and I've been wondering if I belong, if someone like me can really become a doctor, really innovate in healthcare, but watching you today. He trailed off, emotion overwhelming her words. Zara smiled, pulling out a business card. You belong, never question that, and if anyone makes you question it, call us. We're starting a mentorship program next month, reaching out to students in underserved communities, showing them pathways into healthcare and medical technology. We'd love for you to be part of it. The young woman took the card like it was made of gold, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, you have no idea what this means. But Maya did know. She knew exactly what it meant to see yourself reflected in success, to witness someone who looked like you occupying spaces you'd been told weren't meant for people like you. As the reception wound down and guests began departing, Dr. Chen found them one last time. Can we walk for a moment? She asked. They stepped out onto the hotel's terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The late afternoon sun painted the water in shades of amber and rose, the Chicago skyline silhouetted against the fading light. I want to tell you something I've never said publicly, Dr. Chen began, leaning against the stone railing. When I won the Nobel Prize, I was invited to give a lecture at one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country. I arrived early, just like you did today, and I was directed to the housekeeping office. They assumed I was there to clean, not to teach. Maya and Zara exchanged glances. What did you do? Maya asked. I went to the housekeeping office, Dr. Chen said, a wry smile playing at her lips. I met the staff, talked to them about their lives, their families. They were almost all immigrants, mostly women. When I finally made it to the lecture hall and explained where I'd been, the host was horrified. He apologized profusely, but I wasn't sorry it had happened. Why? Zara asked. Because those women in housekeeping. They understood struggle in ways that room full of privileged medical students never would. They understood what it meant to be invisible while being essential. And it reminded me why I do this work, not for the accolades, not for the recognition, but for everyone who's been rendered invisible by systems that only value certain kinds of contributions. She turned to face them fully. What happened today was wrong. But how you handled it with grace and power, with anger channeled into purpose, that's what will change things, not just for you, but for everyone coming after you. Does it get easier? Maya asked. The constant need to prove yourself? Dr. Chen considered the question. Not easier, but you get stronger, and you build community. You find your people, those who see you clearly, who celebrate your wins and support you through the setbacks. And eventually you become that person for others. That's the real legacy. As they returned inside, Maya thought about legacy. About the women who'd come before them, fighting battles they'd never know about. About the women who would come after, who might, if they did this right, face fewer obstacles, less skepticism, more automatic recognition. Later that evening, back at Maya and Marcus's apartment, the four of them gathered around the kitchen table, Maya, Zara, Diane, and Marcus. The award sat in the center of the table, its crystal catching the overhead light. Remember when we used to sit like this doing homework? Zara asked, a nostalgic smile on her face. Mom at the head of the table, checking our math while grading her students' chemistry tests? Diane laughed. You two drove me crazy, always questioning everything, never accepting because I said so as an answer. You taught us to question, Maya pointed out. You taught us that critical thinking was more valuable than obedience. And look where it got you, Diane said, gesturing at the award. I'm so proud I could burst, your father would be. She trailed off, overcome. Marcus stood and pulled out his phone. I think we need to commemorate this moment properly. He started playing their father's favorite song, Curtis Mayfield's Move On Up, and extended his hand to Diane. They all danced then in the small kitchen, laughing and crying simultaneously. It was a moment of pure joy, unmarred by the complications of the day. For these few minutes, they were just a family celebrating an extraordinary achievement. When the song ended, Zara grew serious. I've been thinking about what you said, Mom, about not shrinking to fit other people's expectations, about expanding until we shatter them. What about it? Diane asked. I think we need to expand our mission. The diagnostic units are just the beginning. What if we created a pipeline identifying talented students in underserved communities, mentoring them through college and grad school, helping them launch their own healthcare innovations? Zara's eyes lit up with the familiar spark of a new idea taking shape. Maya nodded enthusiastically. And we fund them. Create our own venture capital firm that invests in founders who look like us, who come from where we come from. Break the cycle of traditional funding that requires you to fit a certain mold. That's ambitious, Marcus said. But if anyone can do it, it's you too. They talked late into the night, mapping out plans, dreaming bigger than the award, bigger than recognition, towards something systemic and sustainable. They talked about creating a foundation in their father's name, about establishing scholarships and research grants, about building an ecosystem where the next Maya and Zara wouldn't have to fight so hard to be seen. Over the following weeks, the video from the ceremony went viral. Not just the confrontation at registration, but their acceptance speech. Belonging in healthcare became a movement, with healthcare workers and patients sharing their own stories of being overlooked, underestimated, or denied access. Maya and Zara found themselves fielding dozens of speaking requests, interview offers, partnership proposals. But they were selective, remembering Dr. Chen's advice about protecting their energy and staying focused on the work. The Westwood Foundation's $5 million investment was just the beginning. Other organizations followed, some genuinely committed to their mission, others motivated by public pressure after the viral video. Maya and Zara learned to distinguish between performative support and authentic partnership. They expanded their diagnostic units to 20 new cities, training community health workers in each location. They established the Jonathan Richardson Fellowship for students pursuing healthcare innovation. They launched a YouTube series documenting their journey, sharing both successes and failures transparently. But perhaps most significantly, they changed the conversation. Hospital systems began examining their own bias in patient treatment. Medical schools started recruiting more aggressively from underserved communities. Venture capital firms created dedicated funds for diverse founders. 6 months after the ceremony, they returned to the Westwood Plaza Hotel for a follow-up event. This time, Catherine Whitmore greeted them at the entrance with genuine warmth. Dr. Richardson, she said, using their honorary titles from the university degrees they'd recently received. Welcome back. Your reserved seats are ready, and I've reviewed all materials thoroughly. They decided to give Catherine a second chance after she enrolled in anti-racism training and reached out with a heartfelt apology, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging the harm she'd caused. She'd also resigned from her position at the hotel to become a diversity coordinator, using her experience to train others in avoiding the mistakes she'd made. Richard Pemberton had invited them to speak to this year's award nominees, a diverse group that included 3 other teams led by people of color, 2 founded by women, and 1 by a non-binary entrepreneur. This, Richard told them privately before the event, is the beginning of what normal should look like. On stage that afternoon, looking out at an audience that finally seemed to reflect the diversity of the communities it claimed to serve, Maya felt a shift. Not completion, there was still so much work to do, but possibility. When we stood here 6 months ago, she began, we talked about assumptions and barriers, about being seen and being heard. Today, I want to talk about what comes after recognition, what we do with the platform we've been given. Zara joined her. Because being in the room isn't enough, being awarded isn't enough, being recognized as excellent, that's just the beginning. The real work is changing the room itself. Changing who gets invited, who gets funded, whose ideas are taken seriously from the start. They spoke for 30 minutes, sharing hard-won insights about navigating systems designed to exclude them, about building in spite of barriers, about the responsibility that comes with success in spaces that so few people like them have accessed. Afterward, Victoria Ashford approached them again. Over the past 6 months, they'd met several times, difficult conversations where Victoria confronted her own biases with painful honesty. She'd restructured her company's leadership team, bringing in diverse voices at the highest levels. She'd changed her investment priorities, funding healthcare innovations that specifically served marginalized communities. "I wanted you to know," Victoria said, "that your diagnostic unit is being installed in my company's health clinic for our employees. But I'm also personally funding units for 5 community health centers in underserved areas." "That's wonderful," Maya said, and meant it. She'd learned that change was possible, even for people who seemed set in their ways. It required humility, discomfort, and genuine commitment. But it was possible. Clarissa, Victoria's daughter, had become something of an ally. She joined HealthTech Solutions' advisory board and used her family's connections to open doors that might have remained closed. As the event concluded, Maya and Zara stood once more on the terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The city stretched before them, full of possibility and challenge in equal measure. "Do you ever think about that moment at registration?" Zara asked. "About what might have happened if Richard hadn't intervened?" "Sometimes," Maya admitted. "But then I think about how many times moments like that have happened without intervention. How many people have been turned away, dismissed, denied access to spaces they earned the right to be in." "And," Zara prompted, "and it makes me grateful we have the platform to talk about it, to name it, to push for something better." Maya turned to her sister, seeing her own face reflected back at her, same features, same determination, same fire. "We're just getting started, Zar. The diagnostic units, the foundation, the mentorship programs, that's all groundwork. The real revolution comes when women like us being in spaces like this isn't remarkable anymore, when it's just normal." Zara smiled. "So we keep expanding until we shatter expectations completely?" "Until there are no expectations," Maya corrected. "Until excellence is recognized regardless of what it looks like. Until belonging isn't something you have to fight for, it's something that's automatic." They stood there for a moment longer, 2 black women who'd been told in countless ways, subtle and overt, that spaces like this weren't meant for them. 2 women who'd responded by not only entering those spaces, but transforming them. Inside, the networking reception was in full swing. Young innovators were connecting with potential mentors. Investors were writing checks for ideas that might have been dismissed in previous years. The composition of the room, the faces, the voices, the perspectives looked fundamentally different than it had just 6 months earlier. "Ready to go back in?" Maya asked. "Always," Zara replied. They walked back inside together, twins who'd spent their entire lives navigating rooms that weren't designed for them, making space where there was none, demanding recognition not for themselves alone, but for everyone who'd been overlooked, underestimated, denied. The ballroom was full of voices, now animated conversations about healthcare access, about innovation, about justice. And at the center of it all, Maya and Zara Richardson moved with the confidence of women who knew exactly where they belonged. Not because someone finally saw them, but because they'd never stopped seeing themselves. The story of that day of being denied seats at a ceremony only to take the stage as honored guests became part of their legend. It was referenced in articles and documentaries, in textbooks about healthcare innovation and social justice. But for Maya and Zara, it was simply Tuesday. Simply one more example of the obstacles they'd learned to navigate with grace and determination. Years later, when they opened their 50th diagnostic center, when they launched their venture capital firm that had invested in 200 diverse founders, when they stood before Congress advocating for healthcare reform, people would still ask them about that day. And they would answer the same way every time. "We were always supposed to be on that stage. The only question was whether the world was ready to see us there. And when it wasn't, we made sure it became ready." Because that's what pioneers do. They don't wait for permission. They don't shrink to fit spaces too small for their vision. They expand, they persist, they insist on their own belonging until the world has no choice but to reshape itself around their presence. And in doing so, they create pathways for everyone coming after them. They ensure that the next generation won't have to fight quite so hard, won't face quite so much skepticism, will find doors already open that they themselves had to force open. That's the real legacy, not the awards or the recognition, but the bridges built, the barriers dismantled, the possibilities expanded. As the sun set over Lake Michigan that evening, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, Maya and Zara Richardson stood together and looked toward a future they were actively creating. A future where excellence came in every color, where innovation emerged from every community, where belonging was a birthright rather than a battle. They'd been denied seats at a ceremony, but they'd taken the stage anyway, and they were never stepping down.